When billionaire heir Kellen Roth marries a quiet pianist he's never met to seal a billion-dollar land deal, he expects silence and obedience. But when the bride lifts her veil, everything changes. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from today. The summer heat in Atlanta was unbearable as Kellen Roth stood in his penthouse office, looking down at the city he practically owned. At 30 years old, he had the cold, calculating eyes of a man who had been taught that emotions were weakness. His dark hair was perfectly trimmed, his suit custom-made. Everything about him screamed money and power. "The Anderson deal is ready to sign," his assistant said, placing a folder on his desk. Kellen nodded without turning around. "And the other matter? Has my mother finalized it?" "Yes, sir. Mrs. Roth says everything is arranged. The Sinclair family has accepted the terms." A smile, not warm but satisfied, crossed Kellen's face. The billion-dollar land deal his family had been pursuing for years would finally be theirs. All it took was a marriage, a simple transaction. "And the girl?" Kellen asked. "She fits the requirements?" "According to your mother, Miss Sinclair is exactly what you specified. Quiet, well-educated, and—" The assistant hesitated. "Low profile." Kellen turned from the window. "Good. I don't need another Victoria." Victoria Green had been his fiancée 2 years ago, a social climber who had almost ruined the Roth name with her scandals and public tantrums. Kellen had ended that engagement swiftly. He wouldn't make the same mistake twice. "Set up the wedding for next month. I don't need to meet her beforehand." The assistant looked shocked. "But Mr. Roth, don't you want to at least see her picture?" "What for?" Kellen sat down at his desk. "This isn't about attraction. It's about continuing the Roth legacy without complications." He thought of his father, once a powerful man who had thrown it all away for love, now living in obscurity after his mother had banished him from the family. "Love destroys empires. I won't let that happen to me." In New Orleans, Amara Sinclair sat at her grandmother's bedside, the old woman's wrinkled hand clutched in hers. The once grand mansion around them was falling apart, with peeling wallpaper and furniture covered in sheets to hide the wear. "The Roths have accepted," Amara said softly, her voice musical even when delivering such news. At 26, she had a quiet beauty that wasn't flashy, but impossible to ignore once noticed. Her dark skin glowed in the afternoon light coming through the faded curtains. Her grandmother, Eleanor Sinclair, nodded weakly. "It's the only way, child. Our family name will be restored." Amara looked down at her hands, pianist's hands with long, elegant fingers that had once played in the finest concert halls, before her family's downfall, before the shame. "I don't know him, Grandma. I don't love him." Eleanor's laugh turned into a cough. "Love? You think my generation married for love? We married for duty, for family." She squeezed Amara's hand. "Besides, what has love gotten you so far? That boy who left you when our money ran out?" Amara flinched. Marcus had been her college sweetheart, promising forever until the Sinclair bankruptcy hit the news. He'd disappeared without even saying goodbye. "The Roths are powerful, child. They can protect you when I'm gone." "But what if he's cruel?" Amara whispered. "Then you be strong," Eleanor said firmly. "You're a Sinclair. We bend, but we don't break." Later that night, Amara sat at the old grand piano in what used to be the ballroom. It was the one thing they hadn't sold, despite offers. Her fingers moved across the keys, playing a mournful Chopin nocturne that echoed through the empty house. Her phone buzzed with a message from her mother. "It's done. The wedding is next month in Atlanta." Amara closed her eyes, letting the music wash over her. This was her sacrifice, her body, and her future for her family's redemption. 1 week before the wedding, Kellen found himself in New Orleans for business. A sudden storm had forced him to seek shelter in the hotel bar where he was staying. "Another scotch," he told the bartender, loosening his tie. That's when he heard it. Piano music so beautiful it made him stop mid-drink. Across the dimly lit lounge, a woman sat at a baby grand piano, her face partially hidden by the shadows. The melody was haunting, filled with a sadness that somehow reached through Kellen's carefully constructed walls. He found himself walking closer, drawn by something he couldn't name. The woman's hands moved gracefully across the keys, her eyes closed, as if the music came from somewhere deep inside her. Kellen stood transfixed, watching her for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When she finished, she didn't acknowledge the scattered applause. She simply gathered her sheet music and slipped away before Kellen could approach her. "Who was that?" he asked the bartender. Just a local girl who fills in sometimes, the man shrugged. Plays like an angel, doesn't she? Kellen returned to his room that night, the melody still playing in his head. For the first time in years, he felt something stir inside him, something dangerous, something that reminded him of his father's weakness. The next morning, he checked out early and flew back to Atlanta, determined to forget the piano player and focus on the wedding, on the business at hand. The wedding day arrived with all the pomp and circumstance expected of a Roth family event. Atlanta's historic St. Philip's Cathedral was filled with the city's elite, not because either the bride or groom had invited them, but because Elaine Roth, Kellen's mother, had decreed it so. "Remember," she hissed in Kellen's ear as they waited at the altar, "this marriage secures the Anderson land deal, nothing more." Kellen nodded stiffly, adjusting his cufflinks. He hadn't even seen a photo of his bride. All he knew was her name, Amara Sinclair, and that she came from old Southern money that had recently dried up. The perfect arrangement. Her family needed his wealth, and his family needed her name to secure the land deal with the old-fashioned Andersons, who would only sell to proper family men. The wedding march began, and the cathedral doors opened. Kellen looked up without much interest, seeing only a slender figure in white, her face completely obscured by a thick veil. "Rather old-fashioned," his mother muttered disapprovingly. Amara walked slowly down the aisle, her heart pounding beneath her grandmother's restored wedding gown. She couldn't see much through the veil, only the outline of a tall man waiting for her, her future husband, a stranger. The ceremony was brief and impersonal. Neither spoke except to repeat the required vows. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Kellen reached for her veil with the casual indifference of a man opening a business letter. As he lifted it, the cathedral fell silent. Kellen froze, his breath catching in his throat. It was her, the piano player from New Orleans. Those same sad eyes, that same graceful presence. Amara, seeing his shocked expression, mistook it for disappointment. She looked down, cheeks burning with humiliation. The reception was held at the Roth estate, a sprawling mansion with manicured gardens and a ballroom larger than Amara's entire family home. Kellen kept staring at her from across the room, trying to make sense of what had happened. When it came time for his speech, he stood with champagne in hand, still rattled by the revelation. "I'd like to thank everyone for coming today," he began stiffly. "As many of you know, this union is part of a long tradition of joining prominent families." He paused, looking at Amara, who sat rigidly in her seat. "The Roth family has always valued strategic partnerships, and this marriage is no exception." A murmur went through the crowd. Even for the calculated world of Atlanta high society, his words were unusually cold. "To my bride," Kellen continued, raising his glass without warmth, "may our arrangement be mutually beneficial." Amara sat perfectly still, her face a mask of composure, even as her heart shattered inside her chest. She had expected a business arrangement, but not such public humiliation. When it was her turn to speak, she stood gracefully, her voice soft but steady. "Thank you all for witnessing our union today," she said simply. "I look forward to honoring the duties of my new role as Mrs. Roth." With that, she sat down, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her pain. Later that night, as they prepared to leave for what should have been their honeymoon but was actually just a weekend at Kellen's lake house before he returned to work, he finally approached her. "It was you," he said, his voice low, "in New Orleans, playing the piano." Amara looked at him with surprise. "You were there? Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. "Tell you what? That your arranged bride occasionally plays piano in hotel bars to make ends meet?" Her voice was quiet, but carried an edge he hadn't expected. "Would that have mattered to you or your mother?" Before he could answer, Elaine Roth appeared, whisking Amara away to change for their departure. "Remember what we discussed," she told her new daughter-in-law coldly. "A Roth wife is seen but rarely heard. Keep it that way." As they drove to the lake house in uncomfortable silence, Kellen kept glancing at Amara. The meek, obedient woman he'd been expecting had been replaced by something far more complex, a woman with depth and talent and pain in her eyes. A woman who might be dangerous to the walls he'd built around himself. The lake house was beautiful, all glass and stone overlooking pristine water, but to Amara, it felt like a prison. "Your room is upstairs," Kellen said stiffly, carrying her suitcase inside. "Mine is down the hall." "Separate rooms," Amara noted. "How traditional." Kellen frowned. "This isn't that kind of marriage." "No," Amara agreed, taking her bag from him. "You made that perfectly clear in your wedding speech." As she turned to go upstairs, Kellen caught her arm. "Why were you playing piano in that hotel? Your family—" "My family is broke, Mr. Roth," she said calmly. "Has been for years. I play where I can, when I can. Don't call me Mr. Roth. We're married now." "Are we?" Amara looked at him directly for the first time. "Because from where I stand, this is just a business transaction. You bought yourself a quiet, obedient wife to please your mother and secure a land deal." She pulled her arm away. "You don't even know me." Kellen watched her climb the stairs, feeling off balance for the first time in years. This wasn't going according to plan. She wasn't going according to plan. That night, he woke to the sound of music. Following it downstairs, he found Amara at the grand piano in the living room, playing the same haunting melody from the New Orleans hotel. He stood in the shadows, watching her. In the moonlight streaming through the windows, she looked ethereal, lost in the music. The sadness in the notes reached into his chest and squeezed. When she finished, she didn't look up. "I know you're there," she said softly. "That piece," Kellen said, stepping forward. "What is it?" "Something I wrote," Amara replied, closing the piano lid gently. "After my father disappeared. After we lost everything. Your father disappeared 8 years ago, took most of our money and vanished." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but her hands trembled slightly. "The scandal destroyed us. My mother never recovered. My grandmother sold everything to keep us afloat, but," she shrugged, "here we are. Me, sold to the highest bidder." "I didn't buy you," Kellen said sharply. "Didn't you?" Amara stood up. "Good night, Mr. Roth." Kellen watched her go, feeling as though he'd missed something important. This woman, his wife, was nothing like what he'd expected. Nothing like the docile, grateful bride his mother had promised. And that terrified him almost as much as it intrigued him. The weekend at the lake house passed in tense silence. By Monday morning they had established an unspoken agreement. They would maintain appearances in public, but privately they would lead separate lives. Back in Atlanta, Amara moved into Kellen's penthouse, but took the guest suite. She spent her days exploring the city, volunteering at a music school, and visiting her grandmother when she could. Kellen buried himself in work, often not returning until late at night, but sometimes, when he did come home, he would hear her playing the piano. And each time he would stand outside the door listening, feeling things he didn't want to feel. One evening, a month after their wedding, Kellen arrived home to find his mother waiting in his living room. "The Andersons signed the land deal today," Elaine announced triumphantly. "They were quite impressed with your new domestic situation." "Where's Amara?" Kellen asked, ignoring her news. "I sent her to check on some renovations at the country club," Elaine waved dismissively. "We need to discuss your next steps. Now that the deal is secured, you should consider starting a family. The Andersons are very traditional, and children would cement—" "No," Kellen cut her off. "That wasn't part of the arrangement." Elaine's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you're developing feelings for that girl. Remember what happened to your father." "This has nothing to do with feelings," Kellen insisted. "It's about boundaries." Their argument was interrupted by the door opening. Amara walked in, stopping short when she saw them. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't realize you had company." "Not company, dear. Family," Elaine said with a cold smile. "We were just discussing your role in securing the Anderson deal. Such a success. And now, of course, the next step would be providing an heir." Amara's face paled, but she maintained her composure. "I see. If you'll excuse me, I'm rather tired." As she turned to leave, Kellen called after her. "Amara, wait." But she was already gone, the soft click of her bedroom door the only response. Later that night, Kellen knocked on her door, but there was no answer. The sound of her piano remained silent, leaving a strange emptiness in the penthouse that he hadn't noticed before. It was only the next morning that he found the note on the kitchen counter, visiting grandmother for a few days. "Don't worry, I'll maintain appearances when needed." Kellen crumpled the note in his fist, feeling an unfamiliar panic rise in his chest. She was slipping away, this woman he barely knew but suddenly couldn't stop thinking about, and somewhere deep inside, beneath years of his mother's cold training, he wasn't sure he wanted to let her go. The Sinclair family home in New Orleans looked even more dilapidated than Amara remembered. Paint peeled from the columns that once stood proud, and the garden that had been featured in Southern Living magazine was now overgrown with weeds. Amara dragged her suitcase up the cracked steps, wondering if she'd made a mistake by running away. But after hearing Elaine Roth discuss her like a broodmare, she couldn't stay in that cold penthouse another minute. Inside, she found her grandmother sitting in the parlor, looking frailer than ever. "Amara," Eleanor Sinclair's eyes widened. "What are you doing here? Where's your husband?" "In Atlanta," Amara replied, bending to kiss her grandmother's papery cheek. "I needed some time away." Eleanor frowned. "That wasn't the agreement. You can't just leave when things get difficult." "He doesn't want me there, Grandma. He made that perfectly clear." Amara sat down heavily on the faded velvet chair across from her. "His mother showed up yesterday talking about me providing an heir, like I'm some prized mare." "And what did Kellen say?" "He said no." Amara looked down at her hands. "But it doesn't matter. This whole marriage is a sham." Eleanor reached for a worn leather book on the side table. "Before you make any decisions, there's something you need to see." Back in Atlanta, Kellen was distracted during his morning meeting. His executives were discussing the Anderson land development, but all he could think about was Amara's empty room and silent piano. "Mr. Roth?" His assistant's voice snapped him back to attention. "Is everything all right?" "Fine," he said curtly. "Continue." As the meeting dragged on, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Victoria Green is back in town. Wants to meet for lunch. Good opportunity to remind everyone your marriage is solid." Kellen's jaw tightened. Victoria, his ex-fiancée, had a talent for causing trouble. If she was back, it wasn't by coincidence. After the meeting, he called Amara. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Frustrated, he grabbed his keys. "Cancel my appointments for the next 2 days," he told his assistant. "Family emergency." "Is everything okay with Mrs. Roth?" she asked with concern. The question stopped him short. Mrs. Roth. Amara was his wife now, even if their marriage was just on paper, and somewhere in New Orleans, she was slipping away from him. "I hope it will be," he said, surprising himself with his honesty. Eleanor placed the leather book in Amara's hands. "Your grandmother's diary," she explained, "from 1964. "What does this have to do with my marriage?" Amara asked, confused. "Read the entry from May 15th. Amara opened the brittle pages carefully, finding the date. Her eyes widened as she read, "Richard Roth came to the party tonight. He's handsome and charming, everything they say. He asked me to dance twice, even though Mother warned me to stay away from him. The Roths are new money," she says, "not our kind. But when he held my hand, I felt something I've never felt before." "Grandmother," Amara looked up in shock. "You knew Richard Roth, Kellen's grandfather?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "We were in love, deeply in love, but my parents forbade the match. They forced me to marry your grandfather instead." "But why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because the story doesn't end there." Eleanor's voice grew harder. "Keep reading." Amara turned the pages, reading entries that detailed a secret affair that continued even after both Richard and Eleanor were married to other people. The final entry made her gasp. "I'm pregnant. The baby cannot be James's. We haven't been together in months. It must be Richard's. What am I going to do?" Amara looked up, her heart pounding. "Are you saying—" "Your mother was Richard Roth's daughter," Eleanor confirmed, "which makes your father and Kellen's father half-siblings. Cousins by blood, if not by name." Amara felt the room spin. "Does Kellen know?" "No one knows except me and now you." Eleanor reached for her hand. "There's more to this story than a simple business arrangement, Amara. The Sinclairs and the Roths have been connected for generations. But why arrange this marriage now after all these years?" Eleanor's eyes grew distant. "Because I'm dying, child, and I needed to make things right before I go." Kellen arrived in New Orleans as a storm was brewing, dark clouds gathering over the city. He rented a car at the airport and drove straight to the address he'd found in Amara's personnel file, the old Sinclair mansion in the Garden District. The house looked nothing like he expected. Where was the grandeur his mother had described? This place was falling apart, barely standing against the approaching storm. He parked and sat for a moment, wondering what he was even doing here. Why had he dropped everything to chase after a woman who was, in essence, just a business partner? Why did the thought of her slipping away fill him with such dread? The first raindrops hit his windshield as he got out of the car and approached the house. Before he could knock, the front door opened, revealing a thin, elderly woman leaning on a cane. "Mrs. Sinclair," he guessed. "You must be Kellen Roth," she said, her voice stronger than her frail body suggested. "You look just like your grandfather." Kellen was taken aback. "You knew my grandfather?" "Better than most," she replied cryptically. "Come in before you get soaked. Amara isn't here." "Where is she?" he asked, following the old woman into the faded grandeur of the house. "She went to the conservatory. She always plays when she's upset." Eleanor led him to a sitting room and lowered herself carefully into a chair. "You hurt her, young man." Kellen bristled. "This marriage was an arrangement." She knew that. "Did she know you'd humiliate her at your own wedding?" Did she know you'd treat her like property? Eleanor's eyes flashed with a fire that reminded him eerily of Amara. My granddaughter may have agreed to a marriage of convenience, but she deserved basic respect. Kellen looked away, shame washing over him. I didn't mean to hurt her, didn't you? Eleanor pushed a leather book toward him. Before you go after her, there's something you need to know about our families. The New Orleans Music Conservatory was nearly empty as the storm clouds gathered outside. Amara sat alone at the grand piano in the practice room where she'd spent countless hours as a student. Her fingers moved over the keys, playing the mournful piece she'd composed after her father's disappearance. The music helped her process the bombshell her grandmother had dropped. Her mother was a Roth by blood. All these years, the family she'd been taught to respect from a distance had been her own flesh and blood, and now she was married to Kellen, a marriage that felt more like a cruel joke with each passing hour. The storm broke outside, rain pounding against the windows as thunder rolled across the sky. Amara played louder, letting the music match the tempest, tears streaming down her face. She was so lost in the sound that she didn't hear the door open, didn't sense the figure standing in the shadows, until a deep voice cut through a pause in her playing. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Amara's hands froze on the keys. She didn't turn around. What are you doing here, Kellen? Looking for my wife. His footsteps approached slowly. You left without saying goodbye. I left a note. She still wouldn't look at him. The land deal is done. You don't need me anymore. Is that what you think? That I only needed you for the deal? Amara finally turned, her eyes red from crying. Isn't it true? You wanted a quiet, obedient wife who wouldn't cause problems, someone to parade around for the Andersons and then put away when not needed. Kellen flinched. I spoke to your grandmother. Then you know, Amara said softly, about your grandfather and her. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. I don't understand why no one told us. Why keep it secret all these years? Pride, shame, the usual reasons families bury their secrets. Amara turned back to the piano, her fingers idly touching the keys without pressing them. Does it change anything for you? I don't know, Kellen admitted, sitting beside her on the bench. It was the closest they'd been since the wedding. I just know I couldn't let you disappear. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating them for a brief moment. In that flash, Amara saw something in Kellen's eyes she hadn't seen before. Vulnerability. Play something, he said suddenly. Not sad this time. Amara hesitated, then began a gentle Debussy piece, her fingers dancing lightly over the keys. Kellen watched her hands, mesmerized. I never told you, he said quietly, but that night in the hotel bar when I heard you play, it was the first time in years I felt anything real. Amara's playing faltered. Oh, what do you mean? My mother taught me that emotions are weakness. After watching my father destroy himself for love, I believed her. He looked at Amara directly. But your music, it reached places inside me I thought were dead. The piece came to its natural conclusion, and they sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the rain against the windows. I don't know how to do this, Amara, Kellen confessed. I don't know how to be anything but what I've been trained to be. And what's that? Cold, calculating, the perfect Roth heir. His voice was bitter. I'm not even sure there's a real person under all that anymore. Amara surprised herself by reaching out to touch his hand. I think there is. I heard him that day at the lake house when you listened to me play. I saw him just now when you admitted you don't have all the answers. Kellen looked down at their hands, his large one covering her smaller one. I can't promise you love, Amara. I don't even know if I'm capable of it. I'm not asking for love, she said softly. Just respect. Just the chance to be myself, not some silent ornament. Thunder crashed outside as their eyes met. For a moment, something electric passed between them. Not quite desire, not quite connection, but the possibility of both. Kellen leaned forward slightly, and Amara held her breath. But before anything could happen, the practice room door burst open. Amara, thank goodness you're still here. They're closing the building because of the storm, and the security guard stopped short, seeing Kellen. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company. The moment shattered. Amara stood up quickly, gathering her sheet music. We were just leaving, thank you, James. Outside, the rain was coming down in sheets. They ran to Kellen's rental car, getting soaked in the few seconds it took to reach it. Well, that was dramatic, Amara said, trying to lighten the sudden tension between them as she wrung water from her hair. Kellen's phone buzzed before he could respond. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. What is it? Amara asked. Victoria, my ex. He showed her the text. Heard you're out of town. Hope your new bride isn't already causing problems. Lunch tomorrow? For old time's sake. Sounds like she's fishing, Amara observed. Victoria always has an agenda. Kellen put the phone away. Let's go back to your grandmother's. We need to talk about what happens next. Eleanor was waiting for them when they returned, sitting in the parlor with 3 cups of tea ready. I see you found her, she said to Kellen. Good. Now we can talk properly. About what? Amara asked, accepting the cup her grandmother offered. About why I arranged this marriage. Eleanor's voice was firm. It wasn't just about saving our family name or securing your future, Amara. Then what was it about? Kellen asked, remaining standing. Redemption, justice. Eleanor's eyes flashed. The Roths stole more from the Sinclairs than just a love affair, young man. They stole our fortune too. Amara gasped. Grandmother, what are you saying? 8 years ago when your father disappeared with our family money, he didn't just vanish. Eleanor's hands trembled slightly. He was working with Alexander Roth. My father? Kellen's voice was incredulous. That's impossible. Is it? Eleanor pulled out an old newspaper clipping. Your father was investigated for fraud around the same time, wasn't he? But miraculously, no charges were ever filed. Kellen took the clipping, scanning it quickly. It was true. His father had faced potential charges that had mysteriously disappeared. Around the same time, Amara's father had vanished. My father was cast out of the family, Kellen said slowly. My mother divorced him, stripped him of the Roth name. If he was involved in something illegal, he was the scapegoat, Eleanor interrupted, the fall guy for Alexander's schemes. Your mother knew everything, Kellen. She protected the Roth name at all costs, even sacrificing her own husband. Amara looked between them, pieces falling into place. So this marriage, it was your way of getting justice, making the Roths pay by having me marry into the family? Not just that, Eleanor said more gently. I wanted the truth to come out. I wanted both of you to know what your families have kept hidden for generations. And what exactly is that truth? Kellen demanded. That the Sinclairs and Roths have been locked in a dance of love and betrayal for 50 years. Eleanor handed him the diary, and that neither family is innocent. Back in Atlanta, Elaine Roth paced her office, phone pressed to her ear. What do you mean he went to New Orleans? After her. He left yesterday, her assistant confirmed. Said it was a family emergency. Elaine hung up, her face pinched with worry. This wasn't part of the plan. Kellen wasn't supposed to develop feelings for the Sinclair girl. He was supposed to marry her, secure the land deal, and keep her in the background, controllable, quiet. She dialed another number. Victoria? It's Elaine Roth. I think it's time for that favor you owe me. The storm had passed by morning, leaving New Orleans glistening in the aftermath. Amara woke early, finding Kellen already in the kitchen making coffee. You cook? She asked, surprised. Coffee isn't cooking, he replied, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. Your grandmother is still asleep. Amara nodded, accepting the cup he offered. What do we do now, Kellen? With everything we learned last night? Kellen leaned against the counter, his expression thoughtful. I don't know. Part of me wants to confront my mother, demand the truth about my father and yours. And the other part? Is afraid of what I'll find. He looked at her directly. What about you? Do you want to continue this marriage knowing it was built on your grandmother's desire for revenge? Amara considered the question. I don't think it was just revenge. I think she genuinely believed she was righting a wrong. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe she was trying to give us both a chance at something her generation never had. What's that? The freedom to choose. Amara set down her coffee. Your grandfather and my grandmother were forced apart. Your father was sacrificed to protect the family name. What if we chose differently? What if we decided for ourselves? Decided what? Kellen asked, moving closer. Whether this marriage is just a business arrangement or whether it could be something more. Before Kellen could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it, frowning. It's the office. I need to take this. Amara nodded, watching him step outside to take the call. Through the window she could see his expression change from annoyance to shock. When he came back inside, his face was grim. We need to go back to Atlanta. Now. What's happened? Victoria Green has called a press conference. She's claiming our marriage is a fraud, that you manipulated me into it. His eyes were hard. And somehow she knows about your father's disappearance and his connection to my family. Amara felt the blood drain from her face. How is that possible? There's only one person who could have told her. Kellen's voice was cold. My mother. They said goodbye to Eleanor, promising to return soon. As they drove to the airport, Amara stared out the window, watching New Orleans fade behind them. "What will happen when we get back?" she asked quietly. "We'll face Victoria together," Kellen said firmly. "Show a united front." "Is that all we are? A united front?" Kellen glanced at her, then back at the road. "I don't know what we are, Amara, but I know I'm not ready to let you go." The flight back to Atlanta was tense, both of them lost in their own thoughts. When they landed, Kellen's driver was waiting to take them straight to the Roth corporate headquarters, where Victoria's press conference was scheduled. "Are you ready for this?" Kellen asked as they pulled up to the building, where reporters were already gathered. Amara straightened her shoulders, channeling her grandmother's strength. "Yes, it's time to stop hiding behind veils." As they stepped out of the car, cameras flashed. Kellen took Amara's hand, the first time he'd done so willingly, not for show. The simple gesture gave her courage. Inside, they found Victoria Green in the lobby, surrounded by reporters. She was exactly as Amara had imagined, beautiful in a sharp, calculated way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and a predatory smile. "Kellen!" Victoria exclaimed with false warmth. "And this must be the mysterious bride. How lovely to finally meet you, Amara. I was just telling everyone about your family's interesting history." "Were you?" Amara replied calmly. "I wonder how you came by that information." Victoria's smile didn't falter. "Let's just say a little bird told me." "A bird who's very concerned about Kellen being taken advantage of." "The only person who ever took advantage of me was you, Victoria," Kellen said coldly. "Or have you forgotten the multiple affairs I caught you having while we were engaged?" The reporters perked up at this new angle. Victoria's smile tightened. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kellen addressed the crowd, "my wife and I have nothing to hide. Yes, our marriage was arranged. Many marriages in our social circle are. But any insinuation that it's fraudulent or that Amara has manipulated me is not only false but defamatory." "Then why did you rush off to New Orleans after her?" Victoria challenged. "Trouble in paradise already?" "I went to New Orleans," Kellen said clearly, "because that's what a husband does when his wife needs him. Something you wouldn't understand, Victoria." The elevator dinged, and Elaine Roth stepped out, her face a mask of composure, despite the chaos in the lobby. "Mother," Kellen acknowledged her coolly. "Perfect timing. I believe you and Victoria have some explaining to do." Elaine's eyes darted between her son, Amara, and the reporters. "I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Victoria is an old family friend who you sent to destroy my marriage," Kellen finished. "Why? The land deal is done. You got what you wanted." "Not everything," Elaine said tightly. "That girl's grandmother is dangerous. She knows things that could damage our family." "You mean the truth?" Amara spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. "About how the Roths and Sinclairs have been connected for generations? About how my father and Kellens were involved in fraud together?" The reporters scribbled frantically, cameras flashing. Elaine's face paled. "This is neither the time nor place," she began. "It's exactly the time," Kellen cut her off. "I want the truth, Mother. All of it. Or I swear I'll resign as CEO and tell these reporters everything we learned in New Orleans." The lobby fell silent, all eyes on Elaine Roth. For the first time in Kellen's memory, his mother looked cornered. "Fine," she said tightly. "My office. Now." She glared at the reporters. "The rest of you out. This press conference is over." As security began ushering the media out, Victoria grabbed Kellen's arm. "You can't be serious about this girl. Look at her. She's nothing like us." Kellen removed her hand firmly. "That's exactly why I'm choosing her, Victoria, because she's nothing like us." The words hung in the air between them. Amara looked at him in surprise, a flicker of hope lighting in her chest for the first time since their wedding day. Choosing her? Did he really mean it? Or was it just another performance for the sake of appearances? Elaine Roth's office was as cold and imposing as the woman herself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of Atlanta's skyline, but no one was admiring the scenery. Kellen stood with his arms crossed, Amara beside him, while Victoria and Elaine took seats behind the massive glass desk. "Start talking, Mother," Kellen demanded, "and I want the whole truth this time." Elaine's perfectly manicured nails tapped against the desk. "Your father was weak, Kellen, just like your grandfather. They both let emotions cloud their judgment." "What does my grandfather have to do with this?" "Everything." Elaine's mouth tightened. "Richard Roth built this company from nothing, but he nearly destroyed it all for that Sinclair woman." Amara stiffened. "You mean my grandmother?" "Yes." Elaine's eyes were cold. "Eleanor Sinclair, the great love of his life, apparently. When her parents forced her to marry into her own social class, Richard was devastated. He married my mother on the rebound, but he never loved her. So you knew about their affair? Kellen asked. Of course I knew. Everyone in Atlanta society knew, even if no one spoke of it. Elaine stood, walking to the window. What they didn't know was that Eleanor was pregnant with Richard's child when she married James Sinclair. Amara gasped. My mother? Yes. Catherine Sinclair was actually Catherine Roth by blood. Elaine turned back to face them. Which made your father, Albert Sinclair, related to the Roths by marriage. When he came to Alexander asking for help with some financial troubles, your father saw an opportunity. To do what? Kellen pressed. To get revenge. Elaine's smile was bitter. The Sinclairs had always looked down on us, despite taking our money, taking Richard's heart. Alexander helped Albert set up some questionable investment funds. They siphoned money from Sinclair family accounts, making it look like Albert had embezzled it all. Amara's face paled. Are you saying my father was framed? Not entirely. He was no innocent. He agreed to disappear, take the blame. In exchange, Alexander promised him a new identity, a new life far from here. Elaine shrugged. It worked perfectly. The Sinclairs were ruined just as Alexander wanted. And my father? Kellen asked. Where does he fit in? He found out what Alexander had done, threatened to expose everything. Elaine's eyes hardened. I couldn't let that happen. The scandal would have destroyed us. So I gave him a choice. Leave quietly with enough money to live comfortably, or face fraud charges alongside Albert Sinclair. You blackmailed your own husband, Kellen said, disgust evident in his voice. I protected this family, Elaine corrected sharply, just as I was trying to protect you from making the same mistakes. This girl, she gestured dismissively at Amara, comes from the same blood that nearly destroyed the Roths twice before. I only agreed to the marriage because I thought she was weak, controllable. And when you realized she wasn't? Kellen asked. I called Victoria. Elaine glanced at the blonde woman, who had remained uncharacteristically quiet. She's always been loyal to the Roth interests. You mean she's always been desperate to be a Roth? Kellen corrected coldly. Tell me, Victoria, what did my mother promise you for this little performance? Money? Or did you think you'd get me back? Victoria's perfect composure finally cracked. She promised me you'd see Amara for what she really is, a gold digger from a disgraced family, that once the truth came out, you'd come back to me. The truth is coming out, Kellen agreed, but not the version you wanted. He turned to his mother. Where is my father now? Elaine looked away. I don't know. We haven't spoken in years. And Amara's father? Do you know where he is? The last I heard, he was in South America somewhere. Argentina, maybe. Elaine straightened, recovering her poise. What are you going to do, Kellen? Throw away everything we've built to chase after a man who abandoned his family years ago? No, Kellen said firmly. I'm going to fix what our families broke. He looked at Amara, starting with us. Amara met his gaze, surprised by the determination she saw there. What does that mean? It means we have a choice, Kellen said, echoing her words from New Orleans. We can let the past destroy us, or we can build something new. Victoria stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's manipulating you, Kellen. Can't you see that? The only person who's been manipulating me for years is you, Mother, Kellen replied, not even looking at Victoria. And I'm done with it. He held out his hand to Amara. Let's go home. Amara hesitated, then placed her hand in his. As they turned to leave, Elaine called after them. If you walk out that door with her, you're choosing sides, Kellen. Think carefully about what that means. Kellen paused, looking back at his mother. I'm not choosing sides, Mother. I'm choosing my own path for the first time in my life. The ride back to Kellen's penthouse was silent, both of them processing everything they'd learned. When they arrived, Amara went straight to the guest suite, closing the door behind her. She needed time to think. Her father had been framed, at least partially. He hadn't just abandoned them. He'd been part of Alexander Roth's revenge scheme against her family. And her mother was actually half Roth. The family connections were more tangled than she'd ever imagined. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Amara? Kellen's voice came through the door. Can we talk? She hesitated, then opened the door. Kellen had changed from his business suit into more casual clothes, jeans and a simple button-down shirt. It was the first time she'd seen him dressed so informally. I made tea, he said, holding up 2 mugs. I remember you liked it at your grandmother's house. The gesture was unexpected. Amara accepted the mug and followed him to the living room, where they sat on opposite ends of the sofa. Did you mean what you said? She asked after a moment. About building something new. Kellen stared into his tea. I've spent my whole life following my mother's plans, being the perfect Roth heir. I never questioned it until what? Until I saw you playing piano in that hotel bar. He finally looked at her. Something about your music woke something in me, Amara. Something I thought was dead. What happens now? She asked quietly. I don't know, Kellen admitted, but I know I want to find out. Without my mother's interference, without Victoria's schemes, just you and me figuring out what this marriage could be. Amara set down her mug. And what if we discover there's nothing there? What if we're too different, too damaged by our families? Then we'll know we tried. Kellen moved closer on the sofa. Amara, I can't promise you the kind of love story people write books about. I don't know if I'm capable of that, but I can promise you honesty from now on, and respect. That's a start, Amara said softly. Kellen reached for her hand, a simple gesture that felt significant. Would you play something? On the piano? Amara nodded and moved to the grand piano in the corner of the living room. As her fingers touched the keys, she realized she didn't want to play anything sad this time. Instead, she began a hopeful Chopin piece, one that spoke of new beginnings. Kellen watched her, mesmerized as always by her talent. When she finished, he joined her on the bench. Teach me, he said suddenly. To play piano? Amara asked, surprised. Just something simple. I've always wanted to learn, but Mother said it was a waste of time. Amara smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Here, she said, positioning his hands on the keys. We'll start with something easy. As she guided his fingers through a simple melody, their shoulders touching, Kellen felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just physical attraction, though he couldn't deny that was there too. This was something deeper, a connection forming through music that words couldn't express. When his phone rang, breaking the moment, he almost didn't answer it, but the caller ID made him frown. It's the hospital in New Orleans, he said, answering quickly. Hello? Amara watched as his expression changed, growing serious. When he hung up, his eyes were gentle with concern. It's your grandmother. She's had a stroke. We need to go back to New Orleans right away. The hospital corridors were blindingly white and smelled of antiseptic. Amara rushed ahead of Kellen, her heart pounding with fear. Eleanor was the only real parent she had left. She couldn't lose her now. The doctor met them outside the ICU, his expression grave. She stabilized, but the stroke was severe. At her age, recovery will be difficult. Can I see her? Amara asked, her voice breaking. Yes, but she's unconscious. Talk to her, though. She might be able to hear you. Amara entered the room alone, leaving Kellen in the waiting area. Eleanor looked small and frail in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to beeping machines. Amara took her grandmother's limp hand, tears flowing freely now. I'm here, Grandma, she whispered. I'm right here. You need to fight, okay? You need to stay with me. Hours passed. Kellen brought coffee, sat with her sometimes, and gave her space other times. As night fell, he insisted she get some rest. I've booked us rooms at a hotel nearby, he said gently. You need sleep, Amara. I promise we'll come back first thing in the morning. Exhausted, she finally agreed. At the hotel, Kellen had arranged 2 adjoining rooms. The gesture wasn't lost on Amara. He was giving her space while still being close if she needed him. Thank you, she said, as they stood in the hallway between their rooms, for coming with me, for being here. Of course, Kellen replied. She's your family. Amara looked up at him, vulnerability in her eyes. I don't want to be alone tonight. Kellen's breath caught. Amara, not for that, she clarified quickly. I don't want to be alone with my thoughts, with my fear. Without a word, Kellen opened the door to his room. They sat on the small sofa together, neither speaking for a long time. Eventually, Amara's head drooped against his shoulder as exhaustion claimed her. Kellen didn't move, letting her sleep against him, watching her face in repose. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was a strength in her that he admired, a quiet dignity, even in the face of everything she'd endured. Carefully, he brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gentle touch causing her to stir. Kellen? She murmured sleepily. I'm here, he assured her. Amara looked up at him, their faces inches apart. The air between them charged with something neither was ready to name. Slowly, Kellen leaned forward, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Their first real kiss was gentle, tentative, a question more than a declaration. When they parted, Amara's eyes remained closed for a moment, as if memorizing the feeling. We should get some sleep, Kellen said softly. Tomorrow will be difficult. Amara nodded, but neither moved to separate. Instead, they stayed on the sofa, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her, finding comfort in the simple closeness. Morning brought both good and bad news. Eleanor had regained consciousness, but the doctors confirmed that she would need long-term care. Her days of living alone in the crumbling Sinclair mansion were over. "I'll arrange for the best care," Kellen promised, as they had breakfast in the hospital cafeteria. "We can find a facility here in New Orleans if you want her to stay close to home." Amara looked at him with gratitude. "Why are you doing this? She's not your family." "She's your family," Kellen said simply. "And you're my wife." The words hung between them, taking on new meaning after everything that had happened. When they went to see Eleanor, she was awake but weak, able to speak only with difficulty. "My diary," she managed to say, gripping Amara's hand. "I have it, Grandma," Amara assured her. "I know everything now." Eleanor's eyes moved to Kellen. "Your grandfather loved me." Kellen nodded, moving closer to the bed. "I believe you." "Not finished," Eleanor struggled to say. "The diary, and missing." Amara and Kellen exchanged confused glances. "What do you mean, Grandma? What's missing from the diary?" But Eleanor's energy was spent. She closed her eyes, her breathing becoming more regular as she slipped back into sleep. "We should check the house," Amara said as they left the hospital later that day. "If there's more to the diary, it might be hidden somewhere there." The Sinclair mansion was silent as they entered, the air inside stale and musty. Amara headed straight for Eleanor's bedroom, where her grandmother kept her most precious possessions. "What exactly are we looking for?" Kellen asked, following her. "I don't know," Amara admitted, but grandmother was very specific about the diary. She said the end was missing. They searched through drawers and closets, finding nothing. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, discouraged. "Maybe she was confused," Kellen suggested gently. "The stroke could have affected her memory." "No," Amara shook her head firmly. "She was trying to tell us something important." She looked around the room, her eyes landing on the old fireplace. "Wait." She crossed to the fireplace, running her hands along the ornate mantel. "Grandmother used to hide things in here when I was little. She called it her secret spot." Her fingers found a small, almost invisible latch. A section of the mantel popped open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. With trembling hands, Amara opened it. Inside were several pages torn from a diary, the same handwriting as Eleanor's journal, but dated years later. "October 15th, 1972, Amara read aloud. "Richard came to me today with terrible news. He believes Alexander is embezzling from the company. Millions of dollars missing, funneled through offshore accounts. Richard is devastated. His own son, stealing from the family legacy." Kellen's face paled. "My uncle was embezzling. As far back as 1972? Amara continued reading. "December 3rd, 1972. Richard confronted Alexander today. It was worse than he feared. Alexander has been working with Jonathan Roth to systematically drain the company for years. Richard is going to the authorities, despite my pleas to handle it privately. He says the corruption must end, even if it destroys his family." "Jonathan Roth was my father's cousin," Kellen said, his voice tight. "He died in a car accident in 1973. Amara turned to the next page, her face growing grave. "January 10th, 1973. Richard is dead. They're calling it a heart attack, but I know better. 2 days before he was to meet with the SEC, he dies suddenly. Alexander was at the house that night. I saw his car leaving as I arrived. I have no proof, but I know in my heart Alexander killed his own father to protect his schemes." Kellen took a step back, shock written across his face. That's impossible. My uncle wouldn't have—" "There's more," Amara said quietly. "April 30th, 1973. I've been gathering evidence of Alexander's crimes for months. Today I confronted Elaine, told her everything I know, showed her the proof. She laughed in my face, said no one would believe me over the Roths. Then she threatened me, said if I ever spoke a word of this to anyone, my daughter would pay the price. I have no choice but to stay silent for Catherine's sake." "My mother knew," Kellen whispered. "She knew what Alexander had done, and she protected him." Amara read the final entry, September 15th, 1998. "After all these years, the past has returned. Albert Sinclair, my son-in-law, has discovered old financial records that point to Alexander's crimes. He came to me for advice. I told him to be careful, but he's determined to use this information. He's meeting with Alexander tomorrow. I fear history is about to repeat itself." Amara looked up, her eyes wide. "That was just before my father disappeared." And my father was forced out of the company, Kellen added. It all connects. Alexander and my mother, they've been covering up crimes for decades. Amara carefully returned the pages to the envelope. This is why my grandmother wanted us to marry, not just for redemption or revenge, but because she knew the truth would only come out if the Sinclairs and Roths were united. This is evidence of serious crimes, Amara. Embezzlement, possibly murder. Kellen ran a hand through his hair. If this gets out, it could destroy Roth Enterprises. Everything I've worked for. What are you saying? Amara asked, her voice suddenly cold. That we should hide this. Protect your family just like they've been doing for 50 years. No, Kellen said firmly. I'm saying we need to be strategic. If Alexander really killed my grandfather and had something to do with your father's disappearance, I want him to pay for it. But we need more than these diary pages. We need solid evidence. Amara studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. And if we find that evidence, what then? Then we bring everything to light, Kellen promised, no matter the consequences. They spent the rest of the day searching the Sinclair house for any other clues Eleanor might have left, but found nothing. As evening approached, they returned to the hospital to check on her condition. No change, the nurse told them, but she's stable. That's good news. As they sat by Eleanor's bedside, Kellen's phone rang. The caller ID showed it was his assistant in Atlanta. Mr. Roth, she said when he answered, her voice urgent. I thought you should know. There's been a break-in at your office. Someone went through all your files. When? Kellen demanded. Last night. Security footage shows it was Ms. Green, Victoria. She used her old access code, which was never deactivated. Kellen's jaw tightened. What did she take? We're not sure yet. But she spent a long time in the file room where the old financial records are kept. Call the police, Kellen ordered, and lock down all company servers. No one accesses any files without my direct authorization. After hanging up, he turned to Amara. Victoria broke into my office. She's looking for something in the old financial records. She's working with your mother, Amara said. They must be trying to destroy evidence before we can find it. We need to get back to Atlanta, Kellen said, standing. Now. Amara looked at her grandmother's sleeping form. I can't leave her. I understand, Kellen said. Stay with her. I'll go back and handle Victoria and my mother. No, Amara said firmly. We do this together. My grandmother has good doctors caring for her. She'd want us to finish what she started. As they prepared to leave the hospital, a nurse approached them. Mrs. Roth, your grandmother was awake briefly while you were gone. She asked me to give you this. She handed Amara a small key. She said you'd know what it opens. Amara stared at the key, recognition dawning on her face. The piano bench. In our old house, grandmother kept a locked compartment in the piano bench. This must open it. They rushed back to the Sinclair mansion, directly to the grand piano in what had once been the ballroom. Amara inserted the key into a small lock on the side of the bench, hidden by decorative carving. Inside was a thin folder, labeled simply Insurance. These are bank statements, Amara said, flipping through the pages. From Cayman Island accounts, and letters. Her voice trailed off as she read. Letters from my father. He's alive, Kellen. He's been in Argentina all this time. What do the bank statements show? Kellen asked, looking over her shoulder. Regular transfers from something called R Enterprises to accounts in my father's name. Millions of dollars, over years. Amara looked up. R Enterprises? Roth? A shell company, Kellen confirmed grimly. My uncle used several of them for overseas operations. This proves he was paying your father off. And this, Amara pulled out a handwritten letter, is from my father to my grandmother, dated just 3 years ago. He says he can't come home because they threatened to harm me and my mother if he ever returned or spoke about what he knew. This is the evidence we need, Kellen said. Bank records, threats, a paper trail leading right back to Alexander, and possibly my mother. Amara carefully returned everything to the folder. So now we go back to Atlanta. Now we go back, Kellen agreed. And we end this, once and for all. Victoria Green was waiting in Kellen's penthouse when they arrived back in Atlanta the next evening. She sat in the living room like she belonged there, a glass of wine in her hand. Breaking and entering is a crime, Victoria, Kellen said coldly as they walked in. So is corporate espionage. Victoria smiled, unperturbed. Is it breaking in when I still have a key? Besides, I just came to talk. About us. There is no us, Kellen replied. There's the door. Use it. Victoria's smile hardened. Don't be hasty, Kellen. I know what you and your little wife have been up to in New Orleans, digging up old secrets that should stay buried. How did you know we were in New Orleans? Amara asked. Elaine has been keeping tabs on you both. She's very thorough that way. Victoria set down her wineglass. She sent me to warn you. Whatever you think you know, whatever evidence you think you have, let it go. Or what? Kellen challenged. Or things could get very unpleasant. For everyone. Victoria's eyes flicked to Amara. Especially for those without the Roth name to protect them. Is that a threat? Amara asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. It's a reality check. Victoria stood, smoothing her designer dress. Elaine and Alexander built Roth Enterprises into what it is today. They won't let anyone destroy it. Not even you, Kellen. Get out, Kellen said, his voice dangerous. Now. Victoria moved toward the door, pausing beside Amara. You should ask yourself if he's really worth it, honey. Kellen's just like his father, weak when it counts. He'll abandon you when things get tough. After she left, Amara turned to Kellen. She's trying to divide us. I know. He locked the door behind Victoria, which means they're scared. We must be on the right track. What do we do now? Amara asked. We need to get these documents somewhere safe, Kellen said, indicating the folder from Eleanor's piano bench. Then we need to find my father. If he was forced out because he discovered what Alexander was doing, he might have evidence of his own. Do you know where he is? Last I heard, he was living in a cabin in the mountains, completely off the grid. Kellen's expression softened. I haven't spoken to him in years, not since my mother forced him out. We'll find him, Amara said, touching his arm gently. Together. The gesture was simple, but meaningful. They were partners now, not just in name, but in purpose. As Kellen looked into her eyes, he realized something had fundamentally changed between them. This wasn't just about solving a family mystery anymore. It was about building a future neither of them had imagined possible. Amara, he said quietly, when this is all over? Let's not talk about when it's over, she interrupted gently. Let's just focus on now, on today. Kellen nodded, understanding. They still had so many hurdles to overcome, so many wounds to heal. But for the first time he could see a path forward, one where the Roth and Sinclair legacies might finally find peace. As they prepared for bed that night, still in separate rooms, but with the doors left purposefully ajar, Kellen found himself standing in the doorway of Amara's room. Thank you, he said simply. For what? She asked, looking up from where she sat on the edge of the bed. For not giving up. On any of it. He hesitated. On me. Amara's smile was gentle. Get some sleep, Kellen. Tomorrow will be a big day. As he turned to go, she called after him. Kellen, I'm not giving up. Not until we find the truth. Not until we make things right. He nodded, a promise passing between them that needed no words. Whatever came next, they would face it united. No longer just an arrangement, but a choice. Their choice. Morning came with a sense of urgency. Kellen and Amara moved quickly, knowing that Victoria's warning meant Elaine and Alexander would be taking action against them. First, they made copies of all the documents from Eleanor's piano bench and stored them in a safe deposit box under Amara's maiden name. We should leave for the mountains today, Kellen said as they had breakfast. My father's cabin is about 3 hours north of here. Do you think he'll talk to you after all these years? Amara asked gently. Kellen's jaw tightened. I don't know. I was barely 20 when he left. My mother convinced me he was guilty, that he'd betrayed the family. I didn't even say goodbye. Amara reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. He'll understand. You were young, and Elaine is persuasive. That's a polite way of putting it, Kellen said with a wry smile. We should pack light. The road to his place isn't great, especially if it rains. As Amara went to her room to pack, Kellen's phone rang. It was his assistant again. Mr. Roth, I'm sorry to bother you, but there's an emergency board meeting being called. Alexander and your mother are saying it's about your mental fitness to lead the company. Kellen's blood ran cold. When? Tomorrow morning at 9. They're claiming you've been making irrational decisions, that your marriage has compromised your judgment. Who's supporting them? Most of the old guard, the ones loyal to Alexander, but Mr. Roth, they're also saying they have evidence you've been embezzling company funds. That's ridiculous, Kellen snapped. It's a setup. I believe you, sir. That's why I'm calling. Security came and took your computer, your files. They're building a case against you. Kellen closed his eyes, thinking quickly. Sandra, I need you to do something for me. In my private safe, there's a flash drive labeled Legacy. I need you to get it and bring it to my penthouse. Can you do that without being seen? Yes, sir, I'll come right away. After hanging up, Kellen found Amara in her room, folding clothes into a small duffel bag. Change of plans, he said grimly. We're being set up. Alexandra and my mother are moving against us faster than I expected. He explained the situation as Amara listened, her face growing serious. They're framing you for embezzlement? The very crime they've been committing for decades? It's smart, Kellen admitted reluctantly. They control the board, the records. It would be my word against theirs, and with their decades of influence. What do we do? Amara asked. We still need to find my father. But first, my assistant is bringing something that might help us. Kellen's expression was determined. I've been keeping my own insurance policy against my uncle for years. I never thought I'd need to use it. When Sandra arrived an hour later, she handed Kellen a small flash drive with shaking hands. They're looking for me, she said nervously. Security questioned everyone about who's loyal to you. It's like a witch hunt at the office. Thank you, Sandra, Kellen said sincerely. Take a vacation, now. Go somewhere for a week or two. Use my personal account to pay for it. After she left, Kellen inserted the flash drive into his laptop. For the past 5 years, I've been quietly tracking unusual financial movements within the company, he explained to Amara. Nothing obvious, just patterns that didn't make sense. Contracts with shell companies, offshore transfers, executive bonuses that weren't properly documented. You suspected your uncle was stealing? Amara asked, looking over his shoulder at the spreadsheets on the screen. I suspected something wasn't right, Kellen corrected. I never imagined it went back to my grandfather's death or that my mother was involved. He pointed to a series of transactions. These all link back to a company called Meridian Holdings. It's supposedly a real estate investment firm, but I could never find any actual properties they owned. Millions of dollars flowing to them every year for consulting services. And Meridian Holdings is connected to your uncle. Not officially, but 3 years ago I hired a private investigator to look into it. He traced the ownership through several layers of shell companies. Guess who's at the bottom of it all? Alexander, Amara guessed, and my mother. Kellen's expression was grim. They're co-owners, hidden behind about 6 layers of corporate veils. This is the evidence we need, Amara said. This connects them directly to the embezzlement. It's a start, Kellen agreed. But we still need my father's testimony to complete the picture. If he knew about this back then, if that's why they forced him out, then we have a case that goes back decades, Amara finished. One that might even connect to my father's disappearance and your grandfather's death. They left the city an hour later, driving north in Kellen's least ostentatious car, a 5-year-old SUV he kept for weekend hiking trips. As the Atlanta skyline faded behind them and the roads grew narrower and more winding, Amara noticed Kellen becoming increasingly tense. When was the last time you saw him? She asked quietly. 8 years ago, Kellen replied, eyes fixed on the road. At my sister's wedding. He was only allowed to attend the ceremony, not the reception. My mother's rules. Tell me about him, Amara encouraged. What's he like? A faint smile touched Kellen's lips. He was different from the rest of the family, more interested in books than business. He loved music, played guitar badly, but with great enthusiasm. Kellen glanced at her. He would have liked you. Yet he married your mother. An arranged match like ours, Kellen said. Though I think he actually loved her, at least at first, until the business became her only passion. As they drove deeper into the mountains, cell service became spotty, then disappeared entirely. The roads narrowed further, eventually turning to gravel. Almost there, Kellen said as they turned onto a nearly hidden dirt track. Dad always said if you could find his cabin without directions, you weren't welcome there. The small wooden cabin appeared suddenly around a bend, nestled among tall pines with a view of the valley below. It was simple but well-maintained, with a wraparound porch and smoke curling from the chimney. Kellen parked and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I don't know if he'll even speak to me, he admitted. He will, Amara said with confidence. He's your father. They approached the cabin together, Kellen slightly ahead. Before they could knock, the door opened. Howard Roth stood in the doorway, a shotgun held loosely in one hand. He was tall like his son, but leaner, with a beard streaked with gray and eyes that had seen too much. Took you long enough, he said simply. Kellen stared at his father in shock. You were expecting us? Howard leaned the shotgun against the wall and stepped back. Eleanor Sinclair called me 3 days ago. Said you two were stirring up old ghosts. His eyes moved to Amara. You must be Catherine's girl. Yes, sir, Amara replied. I'm Amara. Howard nodded once. You look like her. Come in, both of you. I suspect we have a lot to talk about. The inside of the cabin was surprisingly cozy, with well-worn furniture, walls lined with books, and a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Howard gestured for them to sit, while he poured 3 glasses of whiskey. Eleanor had a stroke, Amara said as she accepted the glass. She's in the hospital in New Orleans. I know, Howard replied. I've been making calls from the general store down the mountain, only place with reliable service around here. He looked at his son. Eleanor said you found her diary pages about Richard's death. Kellen nodded. And about Alexander's embezzlement, about Mom knowing everything. He set his glass down untouched. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me the truth? Why let me believe you'd done something wrong? Howard sighed, suddenly looking older. What would it have accomplished, Kellen? You were just starting your career. Elaine made it clear that if I fought her, if I tried to take you kids with me, she'd destroy any chance you had in the business world. So you just left. The hurt in Kellen's voice was raw, decades old. I left to protect you, Howard said firmly, and to gather evidence. So I've spent the last 8 years tracking Alexander's financial schemes, documenting everything. Why? Amara asked. Because I knew someday the truth would need to come out. Howard's eyes were sad. I just didn't expect it would take Eleanor arranging a marriage between our families to make it happen. She knew you were collecting evidence, Kellen asked. Eleanor and I have been in contact for years, Howard confirmed. After your grandfather died, she was the only one who believed Alexander was responsible. She's been my ally in this from the beginning. He walked to a bookshelf and removed a false panel, revealing a small safe. From it, he took a thick folder. Everything is here. Bank records, corporate minutes from meetings where decisions were made to move money, recordings of Alexander threatening me when I confronted him. He placed the folder on the table. Enough to put Alexander away for decades. Possibly your mother too. Kellen stared at the folder, then at his father. Why now? Why not come forward years ago? Because of Albert Sinclair, Howard said, glancing at Amara. Your father. When he discovered some of Alexander's schemes, he went to Alexander directly, thinking he could blackmail him. Instead, Alexander offered him a deal. Disappear with enough money to live comfortably forever, or face fraud charges himself. And my father took the deal, Amara said flatly. He took it because Alexander threatened you and your mother, Howard explained gently. I tried to warn him, but he wouldn't listen. By the time he realized what he'd done, it was too late. Alexander had crafted the perfect fall guy, made it look like Albert had embezzled the Sinclair fortune and fled. Do you know where my father is now? Amara asked, her voice tight with emotion. Argentina, a small coastal town called Mar del Plata. He lives under the name Albert Sullivan. Howard's expression softened. He's tried to contact your grandmother several times over the years. I think he even sent her money when he could. The deposits in the Cayman accounts, Amara realized. Some of them were going to her, not just from Roth Enterprises to him. Albert's been living with a terrible guilt, Howard said. He abandoned his family to protect them, but he's never forgiven himself for it. Kellen watched his wife's face, seeing the conflict of emotions there. Anger, grief, hope. Without thinking, he reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. So what happens now? He asked his father. Alexander and Mom are moving against me. They're calling a board meeting tomorrow to remove me as CEO. They're even claiming I've been embezzling funds. Howard's laugh was bitter. Of course they are. It's their playbook. They did the same to me. We're preparing to do the same to your grandfather before he died. Died or was killed? Amara asked quietly. I've never been able to prove it, Howard admitted. But Richard was in perfect health. The night before he was supposed to go to the SEC with evidence against Alexander, he suddenly has a fatal heart attack, with Alexander being the last person to see him alive. He shook his head. I've always known. But knowing isn't proving. We have Eleanor's testimony in her diary, Kellen pointed out, and with your evidence plus what I've collected, he looked at the flash drive he'd placed on the table. It might be enough. For the embezzlement charges, yes, Howard agreed. But murder, after all these years, that would be nearly impossible to prove. I don't care about proving the murder, Kellen said firmly. I care about stopping them now, before they can hurt anyone else. Before they can frame me like they framed you and Albert Sinclair. What's your plan? Howard asked. Kellen looked at Amara, then back at his father. We go back to Atlanta tonight. We take all this evidence to the board meeting tomorrow. We expose everything. The decades of fraud, the cover-ups, all of it. They won't go down without a fight, Howard warned. Elaine and Alexander will deny everything, claim the evidence is fabricated. That's why we need you there, Kellen said. So your testimony in person. They won't expect that. Howard hesitated, fear flashing briefly in his eyes. I haven't set foot in Atlanta in years, Kellen. Haven't faced your mother since the divorce. I know it's asking a lot, Kellen acknowledged, but we can't do this without you. Amara spoke up. My grandmother risked everything to bring our families together, to make this moment possible. She believed the truth needed to come out, no matter the cost. Howard looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Eleanor always was the bravest of us all. He squared his shoulders. All right, I'll come with you. It's time to end this. They spent the next few hours going through all the evidence, organizing it for maximum impact at the board meeting. As evening approached, they prepared to leave for Atlanta. We should take separate cars, Howard suggested, just in case they have people watching for you. Kellen nodded. We'll leave first. Follow in about an hour. We'll meet at the West Side Hotel instead of my penthouse. They'll be watching that for sure. As they got ready to leave, Howard pulled his son aside. Kellen, I want you to know I'm proud of you. Standing up to your mother, to Alexander. It takes courage. I should have done it years ago, Kellen said regretfully. I should have believed in you. You were a kid, Howard reminded him. Elaine is very persuasive when she wants to be. He glanced toward Amara, who was gathering her things. Your wife seems like a remarkable woman. She is, Kellen agreed, his voice softening. This whole marriage was supposed to be just business, an arrangement. And now? Howard asked with a knowing look. Now? Kellen watched Amara for a moment. Now I can't imagine my life without her. The drive back to Atlanta was tense, both of them lost in thought about what lay ahead. They checked into the West Side Hotel under false names, taking a suite with an adjoining room for Howard when he arrived. While they waited, Amara called the hospital in New Orleans to check on her grandmother. No change, she reported after hanging up. But she's stable. The nurse said she's been asking for us. We'll go back as soon as this is over, Kellen promised. Once Alexander and my mother are exposed, once your father's name is cleared. Do you think he'll come home? Amara asked quietly. My father? After all these years? I hope so, Kellen said honestly. For your sake. Amara moved to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. It's strange. A month ago, I was resigned to a loveless marriage with a cold businessman who saw me as nothing but a transaction. And now? And now? Kellen echoed his father's question, moving to stand behind her. Amara turned to face him. Now I'm fighting alongside that same businessman to bring down a corporate conspiracy. Her smile was soft, and somewhere along the way, I started to see the man behind the cold facade. Kellen reached up to touch her cheek gently. I never thought I could feel this way, he admitted. After watching what happened to my father, I convinced myself that emotions were weakness, that love would only destroy me. And now? Amara asked softly. Now I think perhaps my father was the strong one all along. It takes courage to love someone, doesn't it? More courage than walking away. The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door, the pattern they'd arranged with Howard. Kellen opened it, but instead of his father, 2 police officers stood in the hallway. Kellen Roth? One asked formally. Yes, Kellen replied, tension immediately returning to his shoulders. You're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer continued reading him his rights, Kellen looked past them, seeing his mother standing further down the hallway, her face a mask of cold triumph. Kellen? Amara called from inside the room, alarmed. Call Marcus Green, Kellen told her as the officers handcuffed him. He's my lawyer. Tell him to meet me at the station. And Amara? He looked at her intently. Don't trust anyone. Not until my father gets here. As they led him away, Elaine approached the door. Well, well, she said to Amara. It seems your husband has been very naughty. Such a shame. We both know he's innocent, Amara replied, standing her ground. This is just another frame job, like you did to Howard and my father. Elaine's smile was chilling. Prove it. Oh, wait, you can't. All the evidence points to Kellen. Such a tragic fall from grace. She leaned closer. You should leave town, Amara. Go back to New Orleans. Forget all about the Roths. Never, Amara said firmly. You underestimate me, Elaine, just like you underestimated my grandmother. Something flickered in Elaine's eyes. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. But she masked it quickly. We'll see about that. Enjoy your evening. I hear the food in this hotel is quite good. Perhaps your last nice meal before your world comes crashing down. After Elaine left, Amara immediately called Marcus Green, explaining the situation as briefly as possible. Then she tried Howard's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail, no service in the mountains. She paced the hotel room, fear and anger battling within her. This was clearly a setup, arresting Kellen the night before the board meeting to prevent him from presenting the evidence. But where was Howard? He should have arrived by now. A soft knock at the door made her freeze. The same pattern as before. Cautiously she approached, looking through the peephole. Howard stood there, looking anxious. "Thank goodness," she said, letting him in. "They've arrested Kellen. Elaine somehow got the police involved." Howard nodded grimly. "I saw them taking him out as I was arriving. I had to hide in the stairwell to avoid being seen." "What do we do now?" Amara asked. "Without Kellen, we go forward with the plan," Howard said firmly. "The board meeting is still happening tomorrow. I'll be there with all the evidence. But Amara, it's going to be dangerous. Elaine and Alexander are playing for keeps now." "I don't care," Amara replied. "They framed my father. They destroyed my family. And now they're trying to do the same to Kellen." Her eyes flashed with determination. "It ends tomorrow." Morning came too quickly. Amara had barely slept, worry for Kellen consuming her thoughts. Marcus Green had called late the previous night to say that bail had been denied. Elaine's influence at work again. Howard looked like he hadn't slept either, his face drawn with tension as they prepared to leave for the Roth corporate headquarters. "Remember," he told Amara, "let me do the talking at first. They won't expect to see me there. The shock alone might be enough to throw them off balance." "And if it isn't?" Amara asked. "Then we have the evidence." Howard patted his briefcase. "The truth, after all these years." The Roth building towered over downtown Atlanta, a monument to the family's power and wealth. As they approached the main entrance, security guards moved to block their path. "I'm sorry," one said, not sounding sorry at all. "The building is closed to visitors today." "I'm not a visitor," Howard said firmly. "I'm Howard Roth. This is my daughter-in-law, Amara Roth. We're here for the board meeting." The guards exchanged uncertain glances. Clearly, they hadn't been prepared for this. "One moment, sir," the lead guard said, making a phone call. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Alexander Roth stepped out, his face registering shock before quickly composing itself into a false smile. "Howard," he said, his voice overly pleasant. "What an unexpected surprise. I thought you were still playing Mountain Man up in the wilderness." "Hello, Alexander," Howard replied coolly. "We're here for the board meeting." "Ah, yes, about that. Given Kellen's legal troubles, the meeting has been moved to a more private location. Family matters, you understand." "Cut the act," Howard said bluntly. "We know everything. About the embezzlement, about what you did to Albert Sinclair, about how you've been stealing from the company for decades." Alexander's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "Serious accusations, brother. Without a shred of proof, I might add." "We have proof," Amara spoke up. "Decades of it. Bank records, witness statements, my grandmother's testimony about the night Kellen's grandfather died." For the first time, Alexander's composure slipped slightly. "Eleanor Sinclair is an old woman with a grudge and a failing memory. No one would believe her over me." "They'll believe the evidence," Howard insisted. "Now, are you going to let us into that board meeting, or do I need to call every financial reporter in Atlanta and give them copies of all the documents I've brought with me?" Alexander considered for a moment, then nodded to the security guards. "Let them up. 7th floor boardroom." To Howard and Amara he added, "This is a mistake, one you'll both regret." The boardroom was already full when they arrived, 12 men and women seated around a massive table with Elaine at the head. She froze mid-sentence when she saw Howard walk in. "What is he doing here?" she demanded, standing abruptly. "I invited them," Alexander said smoothly. "Howard seems to think he has some evidence that might interest the board. I thought we should hear him out before dismissing it." Amara recognized the strategy immediately. Appear reasonable, let Howard make his accusations, then tear them apart. It was a trap. Elaine recovered quickly. "Howard, it's been a long time. I see you've bonded with your daughter-in-law. How touching." "Let's skip the pleasantries, Elaine," Howard said, taking a seat at the table. Amara sat beside him. "We're here to present evidence of long-term financial fraud perpetrated by you and Alexander against Roth Enterprises." Murmurs ran through the board members. Alexander held up a calming hand. "Serious charges. But before we get to that, perhaps we should address the reason for this meeting. Kellen's own fraudulent activities. The police have already arrested him, as I'm sure you know. Kellen is innocent," Amara said firmly. "He's being framed, just like Howard was 8 years ago, just like my father was." "Albert Sinclair?" one of the board members asked. "The man who stole his family's fortune and disappeared. The man who was blackmailed into disappearing after he discovered Alexander's embezzlement scheme," Howard corrected. He opened his briefcase, removing the folder of evidence. "Everything is documented here. Decades of systematic theft using shell companies like Meridian Holdings." Several board members shifted uncomfortably at the mention of Meridian. Alexander's smile became strained. "This is absurd," Elaine cut in. "Howard has always been jealous of Alexander's success. These accusations are nothing but bitter fantasy." "Then you won't mind if the board examines the evidence?" Howard challenged, pushing copies of the documents toward each member. As they began to review the materials, the boardroom door opened again. A tall, distinguished man in his 60s entered, followed by Kellen and Marcus Green. "Sorry we're late," the newcomer said. "Traffic was terrible." "Judge Reynolds," Elaine said, clearly shocked. "What is this?" "This," Judge Reynolds replied, "is me doing my job. After reviewing the evidence, Mr. Green presented to me early this morning, I've dismissed all charges against Kellen Roth and issued warrants for the arrest of Alexander and Elaine Roth on charges of fraud, embezzlement, and witness tampering." Two police officers entered behind them. Alexander lunged for the door, but one of the officers blocked his path. "You can't do this," Elaine hissed, her composure finally cracking. "Do you know who we are? What we can do to you?" "What you've done," Kellen corrected, moving to stand beside Amara, "is steal from this company for years. You framed my father, threatened Albert Sinclair into exile, and now you try to do the same to me." He turned to the board members. "The evidence is all there. My father has been gathering it for years. I've been tracking it myself, not knowing the full extent." The board members looked stunned, flipping through the documents with increasing alarm. The shell companies, these offshore accounts, millions of dollars. As the reality of the situation dawned on them, Alexander made one last desperate attempt. "It was all Elaine's idea," he said quickly. "She masterminded everything. I was just following orders." "That's a lie," Elaine shouted. "Alexander killed his own father to protect his schemes. He threatened Albert Sinclair. He's the one who's been stealing all these years." As they turned on each other, the police moved in, reading them their rights while leading them away in handcuffs. "The board will need to elect interim leadership," Judge Reynolds said to the remaining members. "Given the circumstances, I suggest you move quickly to stabilize the company." One of the older board members, who had been silently reviewing the evidence, looked up at Kellen. "I think it's clear who should lead Roth Enterprises through this crisis." He nodded respectfully to Howard. "Unless you're interested in returning, Howard." Howard shook his head, placing a hand on Kellen's shoulder. "My son has earned the right to clean up our family's mess. I'll support him however I can, but this is his company now." As the board members began discussing next steps, Kellen pulled Amara aside. "Are you okay? I was so worried when they arrested me." "I'm fine," she assured him. "But how did you get out? What happened?" "Marcus happened," Kellen said with a grateful nod toward his lawyer. "He worked through the night, got an emergency hearing with Judge Reynolds this morning. Once the judge saw the evidence—" "It's really over?" Amara asked, hardly daring to believe it. "The legal battle is just beginning," Kellen admitted. "But yes, the worst is over. Alexander and my mother will face justice, and," he took her hands in his, "we can finally start over if that's what you want." Before Amara could answer, Howard approached them. "There's a call for you, Amara, from the hospital in New Orleans." Eleanor Sinclair was sitting up in bed when they arrived at the hospital that evening, looking frail but alert. Her face lit up when she saw Amara and Kellen enter hand in hand. "It worked," she said, her voice weak but satisfied. "I knew it would." "You knew everything, didn't you?" Amara asked, taking her grandmother's hand. "About the Roths, about my father. You arranged this marriage knowing exactly what would happen." "I hoped," Eleanor corrected. "I hoped you two would find the truth together, that you would bring justice to both our families." Her eyes moved to Kellen, "and perhaps find something more along the way." Kellen smiled, squeezing Amara's hand. "We did, on all counts." "There's something else you should know," Amara said, her excitement barely contained. "We found Dad. He's in Argentina. Howard's been in touch with him and he's coming home, Grandma. He's coming back to us." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes. "After all these years," she looked at Kellen. "And your father? He's well?" "He is," Kellen confirmed. "He's staying with us in Atlanta for now, helping me restructure the company. We have a lot of damage to undo." "Good," Eleanor said, satisfaction in her voice. "Very good." She closed her eyes briefly, the conversation tiring her. "And what about you two? This marriage that began as business, what is it now?" Amara looked at Kellen, the question hanging between them. They hadn't had time to discuss their future, caught up in the whirlwind of exposing Alexander and Elaine. "I think," Kellen said slowly, his eyes never leaving Amara's, "that I'd like to court my wife properly, if she'll let me." "Court me?" Amara repeated, a smile playing at her lips. "Date you," Kellen clarified. "Take you to dinner. Listen to you play piano. Learn who you really are, not just the woman behind the veil. I'd like that, Amara said softly. Eleanor watched them with satisfaction. Well, that's settled then. Now tell me everything that happened. Don't leave out a single detail. 2 months later, the Sinclair mansion in New Orleans was filled with light and music for the first time in years. Workers had repaired the peeling paint, fixed the sagging porch, and restored the gardens to their former glory. In the ballroom, Amara sat at the grand piano, playing a piece she'd composed, no longer sad but hopeful, with notes of joy threading through the melody. Kellen watched from nearby, still mesmerized by her talent. Eleanor sat in a comfortable chair, looking stronger than she had in years. Beside her was Albert Sinclair, back from his long exile, older and grayer, but finally home. He watched his daughter play with tears in his eyes, still working to rebuild their relationship after so many years apart. Howard Roth stood by the windows, deep in conversation with Catherine Sinclair, Amara's mother, who had flown in from Paris, where she'd been living for the past decade. The family was slowly healing, connections being rebuilt day by day. When Amara finished playing, applause filled the room. She stood and moved to Kellen's side, his arm naturally finding its way around her waist. "I have something for you," he said quietly, leading her away from the others to a quiet corner. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. "I know we're already married," he said with a smile, "but that was a business arrangement made by other people for their own purposes." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald ring. Not a diamond, which would have been the expected choice, but a gem that matched the color of Amara's eyes perfectly. "This is me, Kellen Roth, asking you, Amara Sinclair, if you would do me the honor of being my wife. Not for business, not for family legacy, but because in the past 2 months, I've fallen completely in love with you." Amara's eyes filled with tears. "Are you proposing to your own wife?" "I'm proposing to the woman behind the veil," Kellen said softly. "The woman I want to spend the rest of my life getting to know better every day." "Yes," Amara whispered, smiling through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Again, for real this time." As Kellen slipped the ring onto her finger beside her wedding band, cheers erupted from across the room. They turned to see their families watching, Eleanor looking particularly pleased with herself. "I knew it," the old woman declared triumphantly. "I always knew you two belonged together." Later that evening, as the gathering continued, Kellen and Amara slipped away to the garden, now bathed in moonlight. "Your grandmother is quite the matchmaker," Kellen observed, arranging a marriage to expose decades of corporate crime and family secrets, while also ensuring her granddaughter finds true love. "She's always been 10 steps ahead of everyone else," Amara agreed, leaning against him as they walked. "Though I have to admit, when I first agreed to marry you, love was the last thing on my mind." "And when did that change?" Kellen asked curiously. Amara considered for a moment. "I think it started that night at the lake house, when you listened to me play piano. I saw something in your eyes then, a glimpse of the real Kellen Roth beneath all that cold businessman armor. For me, it was the moment I lifted your veil at our wedding," Kellen admitted. "Not just because I recognized you from the hotel bar, but because I saw such quiet strength in your eyes. Even as I was humiliating you with that terrible speech, you stood there with more dignity than anyone I'd ever known. We've come a long way since then," Amara said, looking up at the stars. "From a marriage of convenience to this. And we have your grandmother to thank," Kellen said, "along with my father. They never gave up on finding the truth even when it seemed impossible." "Speaking of your father," Amara said, "what's going to happen with Roth Enterprises now?" Kellen's expression turned thoughtful. "The board voted unanimously to keep me as CEO. We're going through every contract, every account from the past 20 years, cleaning house completely." He smiled. "My father has agreed to come back as an advisor, and we're establishing a music foundation." "A music foundation?" Amara asked, surprised. "The Sinclair Roth Music Foundation," Kellen explained, "to provide scholarships for talented young musicians who couldn't otherwise afford training. I thought, maybe you'd like to run it?" Amara stopped walking, turning to face him fully. "You'd do that? Create a foundation just because I love music?" "I'd do a lot more than that for you, Amara," Kellen said simply. "You changed everything for me. Showed me there's more to life than balance sheets and business deals. And you showed me I could be strong," Amara replied softly, "that I didn't have to hide behind silence anymore." In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their families laughing together, healing old wounds, creating new bonds. The Roth and Sinclair legacies, finally united not through schemes or arrangements, but through love. "So what happens now?" Amara asked, echoing the question she'd asked him so many times over the past months. Kellen smiled, drawing her close. "Now we write our own story. No veils, no secrets, just us." As he leaned down to kiss her, Amara felt the last walls around her heart dissolve. Their marriage had begun as a business arrangement, a transaction between families with hidden agendas. But beneath that veil, they had found something neither expected, a love strong enough to heal the wounds of the past and build a future neither family could have imagined. In the moonlit garden of the restored Sinclair mansion, with music and laughter spilling from the windows, Kellen and Amara sealed their new beginning with a kiss that promised forever, not out of duty or arrangement, but out of choice. Their choice. 6 months later, the New Orleans Music Conservatory was filled to capacity for its grand reopening. The building had been renovated with funds from the Sinclair Roth Music Foundation, transforming the aging facility into a state-of-the-art music center. Amara stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd that had gathered for the occasion. In the front row sat Eleanor, healthier now and beaming with pride. Beside her were Albert and Catherine Sinclair, reunited after years apart and working on rebuilding their relationship. Howard Roth sat with them, looking years younger now that the burden of secrets had been lifted from his shoulders. And next to Howard was Kellen, watching his wife with unmistakable love and pride in his eyes. "Music has the power to heal," Amara told the audience. "It can bridge divides, mend broken hearts, and connect people across generations. That's what this foundation aims to do, use music to create harmony where there was once discord." After the ceremony, as guests mingled and toured the new facilities, Kellen found Amara in the main recital hall, sitting at the grand piano but not playing. "Penny, for your thoughts?" he asked, joining her on the bench. "I was just thinking about how much has changed," she replied. "A year ago I was playing piano in hotel bars to make ends meet, agreeing to marry a man I'd never met to save my family's name. And now?" Kellen prompted, taking her hand. "Now I'm running a foundation, helping young musicians, watching my parents try to fall in love again after 20 years apart." She smiled at him. "And I'm married to a man who sees me, really sees me." "Best business decision I ever made," Kellen teased, earning a playful slap on the arm. "Speaking of business," Amara said, her expression turning more serious, "have you heard anything about your mother or Alexander?" Kellen nodded. "Alexander took a plea deal. He'll serve at least 15 years. My mother's trial starts next month. Neither of them will ever control Roth Enterprises again." "Do you ever visit them?" Amara asked gently. "I've seen my mother once," Kellen admitted. "She still won't admit she did anything wrong. Still thinks she was protecting the family legacy." He shook his head. "Maybe someday she'll understand that legacy is about more than money and power." "And what is it about?" Amara asked, genuinely curious about his answer. Kellen looked around the recital hall, at the place that would nurture young talent for generations to come, bearing both their family names. "It's about what we leave behind," he said thoughtfully, "not just wealth or buildings, but how we've changed people's lives, the good we've done." Amara smiled, leaning against his shoulder. "That sounds suspiciously like something my grandmother would say." "She's a wise woman," Kellen acknowledged with a grin. "Terrifyingly manipulative, but wise." "She got us together, didn't she?" Amara pointed out. "Best manipulation ever," Kellen agreed, kissing her softly. From the doorway, Eleanor watched them with satisfaction. Her plan had worked better than she could have imagined. The truth had come out. Justice had been served. And most importantly, her granddaughter had found true love with a man worthy of her. As she turned to leave them their privacy, Eleanor whispered a silent thank you to Richard Roth, the man she had loved and lost so many years ago. Somehow she felt certain he was watching, and that he approved of how their families had finally come together, not through schemes or arrangements, but through the one thing that had eluded them in their own time: love, freely given, freely chosen. Love that had finally emerged from beneath the veil of the past. The end.